Welcome. This is my playthrough for the Fall Major of 2019. Hole 1 is a par 4. I'm going to play at 20% over for elevation on both shots. For the first shot, I just used my Apocalypse, so I'm going to adjust about 1.8 left and about 2 backspin. And I want to aim right up here between these two bunkers. I've seen several opponents use the rock driver here. I just don't switch out, so I'll have to adjust just a little bit. I use the Notebook app, so with a 7.6 mile per hour wind, I'm using a Power 3 ball, 100% club, 20% for elevation. And I'm going to need about 6.5 rings on my adjustment. 6.5 rings, and then drive it down, and doesn't have to be real accurate, but I want it to be down close to between those two bunkers, maybe even a little bit right of center. So if this shot was a little bit more to the right, it would be okay. I may even give a better angle on the second shot. With my second shot, I was playing this with a 10% overplay for elevation. You'll see this one, I didn't adjust back quite far enough, so I changed that to a plus 20% for elevation. So where I'm lined up here, I'm lined up to land on the fairway, but the ball is going to go a little bit far and land on the fringe. It's going to go up higher on the green than I expected, but it still catches the funnel since I hit a perfect shot, and it drops back down into the hole. So you see that land on the fringe instead of on the fairway where I was aiming. It goes way up higher than I expected to go, but still caught the funnel that time and went in. Here's a second look at that same shot. So this time, instead of just lining up, you'll see me move it left or right. Try to find where that funnel is. You can see that ball guide is not moving at that spot. So now I need to get it where I can see the ball guide, but I want to adjust it to the right just a little bit. And now I'm in that funnel. So now I could miss it just a little bit left or right, and that ball would still go in. This time I'm going to adjust 20%. So I had an 8 mile per hour wind, 20% over adjustment. I'm at about 25% of max club. So that's about an 8.2 ring adjustment. So that was the adjustment you saw me make. And now if we hit this perfect, even if we hit it great left or right, should have been in that funnel. That one lands on the fairway instead of the fringe. Doesn't roll up quite as high on the green. And rolls back down and drops in. All right, hole 2 is a par 3. This one we're going to play with 30% overplay for elevation. And I'm going to use about 90% of the full club on the sniper. And we're going to land about in this area. I want to go about 1.1 bars to the right. And I want about 1.2 rings inside of the rough. And then we're going to move it around. We're going to look for the funnel and then slightly curl to the right. Now, typically once I figure this hole out, I'm going to adjust that ball. I'm going to put the 1.1 or so ring bars to the right and then look for the spot to land this. So I only do right at 1 bar. I want to go just a little bit more, especially with a low wind, that's 7.3. Definitely want to get 1.1 on that. So I'm using my sniper, 30% over adjustment for elevation. I'm at 90% of the club. So with the 7.3 mile per hour wind, I want about 9.5 rings of adjustment. 9.5 rings. And then I want to put a slight curl to the right on this. Hit perfect shot. It catches that funnel Goes right into the hole. Hole 3 is a par 5. I'm going to use the big topper. I want to do a full top spin, about 1 to the right, slight curl to the right. So we're landing it in here and driving it up. I am playing that 10% over adjustment for elevation. Second shot, the same thing, 10% overplay. When we get to the second shot, we're going to use a sniper full backspin. I want the ball guide right up to the back edge of the green. So right close to the fringe, but then roll it back down. And I want that ball guide aimed right at the cup when I'm coming back down. So big topper, full top spin, just a little bit to the right. This whole thing slants to the left. So that's why I put the little bit of right side spin, and I'm going to curl it right just a little bit as well. 7.7 mile per hour wind, 10% over adjustment, 100% as I'm going full club. I'm going about 4.3 rings. And you'll see I'm not real worried about that one being very accurate. I just want it out there in the middle of the fairway. So I'm doing about half a ball of curl to the right. And you see after this ball, as it starts to slow down, it's going to catch that slope and it's going to turn left. So that's why we want to try to go right the entire time. And my second shot, using a sniper, 10% overplay, but I was probably at about 25 or 30% of the max distance. So full backspin, I put one right on there. I want that ball guide to go right up to the edge of the fringe, the end of the green, and I want that line to be pointed right at the cup. Just for the wind. And I get a great left, so just left of perfect. Ball rolls right up to the end of the green, goes just slightly left. Perfect ball that probably would have been in. Hole 4 is a par 3. I'm going to use a 20% over adjustment in full club. I'm going to use a long iron, land right in here, bounce over the sand. I'm going to use about 5 rings to the right and about 1 ring of backspin. And both of those are kind of depend upon what kind of wind and what kind of angle we have. But we do want to look for a funnel. So we're going to find a spot here where it lands and we have kind of a funnel down to the hole. So if I'm using a Goliath, I'm going to be about 2 rings from the rough. And if I'm using a B52, I'm going to be about 4 rings from the rough in that spot. So this time I've got the Goliath. I'm going to pause it there for a second. You'll see we have an 8.8 wind. That's close to the maximum we can have. So since we have a pretty strong tailwind, and this angle is more behind me than across, so I've seen the arrow, the wind going a little bit more of an angle than that instead of more of a tailwind. So with this one, I'm using about 1.1, maybe 1.2 on the backspin, and I'm going 5 rings to the right. If I have more crosswind, I'll take a little bit of that side spin off. So, and you'll notice how that funnels. I'm moving it left to right, and the landing spot, the second bounce, was not moving. About 2 rings away. So 8.8 miles per hour. We're at 100% max club, 20% over adjustment for elevation. We're going to go about 5.8 rings on the Goliath. Make our adjustment. Then and hit a perfect shot. And you'll notice with the tailwind, that ball landed on the fringe. I had it lined up on the fairway. So with that strong of a tailwind, it really elongates the ball guide. Hole 5 is a par 4. If you have an Apocalypse 5 or higher, you can use a Berserker. If you have Extra Mile 8 or Apocalypse 4 or lower, you're going to want to use probably a Snow Globe or a Monster Ball, something different. So the Wind Zero balls. And what we're going to do is align this thing right in here. Since the entire fairway is sloping down to the right, that ball is going to drift down, or at least that's the way Monica explained it to me. So since you have that slope, we want to aim left because the ball is going to drift off to the right. So when we line this up, we're going to use full right, and we're going to use 1 to 1.5 bars of backspin depending on the wind. We are going to use a full overpower, about 3/4 of full curl to the right. And then we want to hit this perfect. It's not a power slice. It's just an overpower shot. Okay, so you'll see the mistake, a couple of mistakes that I make here. I went almost 2 back. We have a very low wind, 9.4. That's about as low as it's going to get with a Berserker. And I could have also corrected that if I used just a little bit less curl. I hit it perfect, but because of the low wind, it's not going to carry quite far enough. I catch right on that ridge, catch the rough. So if I just curled it a little less, it would have rolled right down to the hole. Okay, now when we have a hole like this, there is no chance of hitting a fairway bunker on this hole. So you'll see, even though I've got a pretty good Spitfire, I'm using the Malibu because it has the better ball guide. It still has 100% accuracy. So I'm going to set this up, and if I can hit this perfect, I'm going to try to pause it here. What I look at, and when I'm doing the full overpower with the Apocalypse, or if I'm hitting a sand wedge, and you got to figure out some technique that works for you. But I look at this white ring on the sand wedge, and I try to release right at that spot, and that'll get me pretty close to perfect. So that's my goal. That's what I watch when I'm dealing with the fast needle. I was able to catch that one perfect. Rolls right down, and I'm able to save that eagle. Hole 6 is a par 5. I'm going to play the first shot with a 20% overplay for elevation. I'm going to use 6 topspin and go right as much as possible, and I'm going to use a slight curl to the right. I am going to use full overpower when I hit my shot. So I'm going to try to land in here. I want it to roll up pretty close to the center of the fairway. This left side slopes away really bad, so that's why I use the right on the spin on the ball and a slight curl right with my when I pulled back the shot. So I want it up in here. My second shot, I'm going to try to land it right up in here with the rough bump, doing a minus 10% on the adjustment, and I'm going to go about 2 left and about 2-ish top spin. So just to make sure I get the ball up to the hole. So I'm going to go 6 top spin, right as much as possible. And I'm going to play it about 3 rings off of that rough on the left. So with an 8.9 mile per hour wind, 20% over adjustment for elevation, full club, I'm going to go about 7.6 rings on my Apocalypse. Turn this around, and since I'm pulling back just a little bit, so I'm less than max club, I'm going to turn it back around and push that forward back out to the max club distance. So slight curl to the right, full overpower, and this one I hit a great left. So you'll see I'm a little close to the rough, but not too bad. And since I adjusted it that way, if I had hit that perfect, I would have been up in this area a little bit more. But we're in good shape right there. So with the second shot, I'm playing a 10% under adjustment. I'm going to do the rough bump. And again, about 2 to the left and about 2 on the top spin. So somewhere in that, got a little bit more left on this shot. But I want to try to find that ridge. I'm going to pause that. But if you notice, ball guy's going back and forth. There is a definite ridge right here in front of that hole. And it's extremely hard to get this one in. You see that ball guide right at the hole, but with that tailwind, it is going to extend out. So I do want this ball kind of coming in hot, because when I hit that flagstick, I want it to drop right there. Because if you're slightly off, it's going to throw you left or right. And with the 9.1 mile per hour wind, I'm at about mid club. I'm using a minus 10%. So it's an uphill elevation. It gives me about 7.5 rings on my sniper. So I've got it lined up at the cup. I'm going to adjust about 7.5 rings for the wind. If we hit this perfect, it should go in. But we got a great left. So it catches that rough and it rolls just to the left of the pin. I'm going to pause it right here. That rolled a good way by. So again, with that ridge on the front, I want this ball coming in a little bit hot. So when I've made this, it's extremely tough to get that ball to die right at the cup. It has to come in hot, hit the pin, makes the shot just a little bit easier. Hole 7 is a par 3. This is a tough hole because pretty much the only way to get there is to use curl. But I'm going to play this with a 20% over adjustment, full club on the sniper. I'm going to use 4 to 4.2 bars of backspin, and I'm going to go right as much as possible. And I'm going to line this up right in here. I'm going to go about 5 rings away from the rough. And then I want the center to be right over that right edge of that little peninsula down in the sand. So get our sniper over here. 5 rings from the rough. Center right edge. Going right as much as possible. I want about 4 backspin here. It's a fairly low wind. So I have an 8 mile per hour wind using full club, 100% of the club, 20% over adjustment for elevation. Means I'm going to use 9.8 rings on my adjustment. So line this up and right at 10 rings. And then I'm going to use about 3/4 of the ball of curl. It's a little more than 3/4. So when that ball lands, if it goes just to the right of the pin, which this one did, it's going to funnel right back down to the hole. If you get on the left side, it'll stay on the left. But if you get on the right side of that pin, there's a funnel that'll take it right back down to the cup. Hole number 8, I'm going to use the big topper. I'm going to set this down about 1 ring from the sand right in this spot. We're going to use full top spin, about 1 bar to the left. And when we line it up, we'll see in the video, but we're going to go right over the right edge of the right bush. There's 2 bushes that we'll see right here when we look at it. We want to go right over the right edge of that right bush. And I'm close to minimum adjustment, probably about 30% of max club. So full top spin, 1 to the left. And right there, pause it for a second, you can see the 2 bushes down there below. So you want to go right over that right edge of the right bush. So when you do that, this whole thing down here slopes, But as you get over here too far to the left, it flattens out. If your ball lands in here, it's going to land and stop quick. But over here, you're on more of an incline. It's going to hit that and it's going to kick it back left towards the pin. So we have a 7.1 mile per hour wind, about 35% of max distance, not using any elevation adjustments on this one. So that means about 3.1 rings. Now I'm using Big Topper 7. On other accounts, I have Big Topper 5, and I've been able to do the exact same shot. The rings are more because of its lower accuracy. But I've pulled this shot off, exact same shot with the Big Topper 5. I'm going to turn this around just for those 3 rings. A little over 3 rings. And this one, I think I great right. But there's, we're not risking hitting the tree. Played it more to the right center, but you see that slope, how it comes off that hill and kicks it back down towards the pin. All right, so now just a little chip in, using the Embringer, which is 100% accuracy. So it's 1-to-1 at max distance. Now I'm going to pause right here for a second. There's a little ridge right here. So you'll notice whenever I move my ball guide back and forth just a little bit, the end of that swings a lot. So that's a bad spot, because if I miss my adjustment by just a little bit, or if I hit a great ball, even left or right side of perfect, it could throw it off. So that's a bad place to land. So when you see that big adjustment, I need to find a different spot. So I'm going to use full left. And now when I move it left and right a little bit, it wasn't moving. I'm at about 25% of max club, so I'm going to do about 25% of that. So right at a little over 2 rings. And now where I'm at, even if I hit great, it's still going to go in. Now, final hole, hole 9. This is a par 5. I'm going to use the Big Topper. I'm going to use full top spin, about 1 bar to the right, and then I'm going to use a slight curl to the right on my drive. I'm going to land it right in here, and then try to make sure that I don't catch that sand trap. So that's why I'm trying to angle it just a little bit to the right. With my second shot, I'm going to use about a 15% over adjustment, and I'm going to do a rough bump right up in this area, and I'm going to go about 5 to the left and about 4 top spin. Now when you pull this one, because the wind's going across, you're going to drop down into this bunker. So you're going to lower ground. I'm going to push it up about 1 ring before I make my adjustment. So you'll see me do that in the video. All right, so full top spin, just a little bit to the right. And I want to set that ball guide up close to the sand. I'm going to pull it back because the wind's angling just a little bit. So I'm just to the right, and I'm recording a replay so you can't see, but I'm doing a slight curl. You can see the angle of that ball. It's moving to the left, to the right, because it was a little bit of right curl. Miss the sand trap and roll up real nice. So with my second shot, I'm doing a 15% adjustment for elevation. You can see I'm close to max club. But I want it right in here. Going about 5 rings to the left, about 4 on the top spin. But I just want that ball guide right up to the hole. Now because I'm adjusting down, so you see me pushing it up right there. I pushed it forward about 1 ring, and I do that before I make the adjustment just because I'm usually looking straight down the ball guide. Back that up just a little bit. So I'm looking straight down the ball guide. I'm going to push this up 1 ring before I turn it sideways and make my wind ring adjustment. So I pushed it up. Now you see that ball guide going up and past the hole. So we had 7.4 mile per hour wind. I'm almost at max club. I'm using a 15% over adjustment. So that gives me about 8.6 rings that I need to adjust for the wind. Turn this back around. Again, you'll see when we adjust for this, we are going to drop down into the sand trap. So since we're at lower ground, that means the ball is going to come up short. That's why we pushed it forward a ring. This one, no curl, no overpower, just hit a perfect shot, catches that rough, rolls right into the cup for an albatross. All right, and that is my guide, and I do wish all of you good luck in the tournament.